The amber synthetic ale tasted like regret and broken dreams as Marcus Kane sat hunched in the darkest corner of Nexus Station's most notorious cantina. The raucous laughter of alien warriors filled the smoky air, each cruel chuckle like a dagger to his pride. For the third time this week, he'd become their evening's entertainment. "Look at the pink skin," hissed Commander Zektar, his massive Krex frame casting a shadow over Marcus's table. The reptilian warrior's scarred hide gleamed under the cantina's harsh lights, each mark a testament to battles won and enemies conquered. "Still nursing that pathetic drink like it'll wash away your species' weakness." The blue-skinned Zeltharians at the bar clicked their mandibles in rhythmic amusement, their compound eyes glittering with malicious joy. The serpentine Vashti coiled around their seats, forked tongues tasting the humiliation in the air. Even the usually stoic Omnari crystal beings pulsed with colors that Marcus had learned meant contempt. 17 military missions, Zektar continued, his voice carrying across the entire establishment. 0 battle commendations, 0 heroic actions, 0 reasons why the consortium should waste resources on human soldiers. He leaned closer, his breath reeking of fermented Krex battle stims. "Your own commanders won't even trust you with real combat assignments anymore." The words hit harder because they were true. Marcus Kane, once a promising graduate of Earth's elite military academy, had been systematically relegated to salvage operations and archaeological surveys. Too fragile for frontline combat, they said. Too slow for rapid response. Too weak to matter when real warriors were needed. "At least I earned my position through merit," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible over the cantina's din. "I didn't rely on being born with natural armor and predatory instincts." The laughter that erupted was deafening. Zektar's reptilian features twisted into what passed for a grin among his species. "Merit? Is that what humans call failure now?" He gestured grandly to the assembled crowd. "Tomorrow we deploy to the Forgotten Sector for a real mission. Dangerous salvage, hostile territory. The kind of work that separates true warriors from pretenders." Marcus's heart sank. The Forgotten Sector, he'd been studying the classified reports for months, fascinated by the archaeological implications. Ancient derelicts from the predecessor civilizations, ships built with technology that modern science couldn't even classify. The sector was supposedly cursed, filled with ghost ships and phenomena that drove explorers mad. "Real warriors only," Zektar announced with theatrical flair. "You'll be staying here, human, polishing civilian salvage and pretending your species matters in a galaxy built for the strong." As the crowd gradually dispersed, still snickering and sharing jokes in a dozen different languages, Marcus stared into the amber depths of his drink. The liquid reflected the cantina's lights like tiny dying stars, and in that moment, he saw something that hadn't been there before. Not defeat, but possibility. The Forgotten Sector. Ships older than recorded history. Technologies that could rewrite everything the galaxy thought it knew about power and evolution. His hands steady for the first time in months, Marcus finished his drink and stood. The other patrons barely noticed the lone human leaving. They were too busy celebrating their own superiority to pay attention to what they considered cosmic irrelevance. But as he walked toward the exit, Marcus Kane felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt since childhood. The unshakable human conviction that the impossible was simply another word for not yet attempted. That night, in his cramped quarters aboard the station, Marcus made a decision that would either end his career in disgrace or remind the galaxy why humanity had survived long enough to reach the stars in the first place. He was going to the Forgotten Sector with or without permission, and he was going to prove that being underestimated was humanity's greatest strategic advantage. The stolen reconnaissance ship Wanderer cut through space like a blade through silk, its engines running on whisper mode to avoid detection. Marcus had liberated it from Nexus Station's impound bay in the early hours of the morning, when the security guards were more interested in their card games than monitoring low-priority vessels. Technically grand theft, but his career was heading for court-martial anyway. Might as well make it spectacular. The Forgotten Sector stretched before him like a cosmic cemetery, vast and haunting in its desolate beauty. Massive hulks of unknown vessels drifted in the eternal darkness, some so large they had their own gravitational fields, others broken and twisted into impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. The debris field contained fragments of civilizations that had risen and fallen when the current galactic species were still primitive organisms struggling to evolve consciousness. Computer, initiate deep-range scan. Look for vessels with minimal structural compromise and any active energy signatures, Marcus commanded, his fingers dancing across the control interface with practiced precision. The AI's response came after several long minutes of analysis. Scanning complete. 17 vessels detected with hull integrity above 70%. Warning: this sector is classified under Galactic Consortium Archaeological Preservation Act 2387. Unauthorized exploration is punishable by override authorization. Emergency Salvage Protocol Kane 77 Alpha 9er, Marcus interrupted, using a combination of his old military codes and pure fabrication. Authorization accepted, the AI replied, apparently satisfied with the official-sounding nonsense. Marcus piloted carefully through the graveyard, his enhanced sensors painting detailed holographic images of each derelict. Most were clearly the work of known extinct species. The geometric perfection of the vanished hegemony, the crystalline structures favored by the silicon mines, the biological curves of the symbiont collective. But one vessel stood apart from all the others. It was massive, easily stretching over a kilometer in length, but its design was unlike anything in the archaeological databases. Where other predecessor ships were clearly alien, this one possessed an almost familiar aesthetic, proportions that seemed right to human eyes, corridors sized for bipedal beings of roughly human height and build, doorways that invited rather than intimidated. Computer, focus all sensors on that vessel. The one bearing 27 Mark IV. The readings that came back made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Impossible, he whispered. Life support active. Minimal power generation still functioning. Structural integrity at 94%. He leaned forward, studying the energy patterns. This ship has been here for millennia, but it's still alive. The docking sequence proceeded with eerie smoothness, as if the ancient vessel was welcoming him home. As the airlocks cycled and pressure equalized, Marcus felt something he couldn't quite identify. A tingling sensation that seemed to reach deeper than his skin, touching something fundamental in his genetic code. He stepped through the airlock into a corridor that defied explanation. The walls pulsed with soft bioluminescent patterns, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. But what struck him most profoundly was the sense of recognition, as if he were walking through halls designed specifically for him. Computer, detecting any biological traces or active systems? Negative life signs. However, massive energy signatures detected throughout the vessel. Recommend extreme caution. Commander. Marcus pressed forward, his plasma rifle feeling suddenly primitive in his hands. The ship's architecture was hauntingly beautiful. Flowing organic lines that suggested growth rather than construction. Surfaces that seemed to respond to his presence with subtle shifts in luminosity. And then, at the end of the main corridor, he found the chamber that would change everything. The chamber that Marcus entered defied every law of architecture he understood. The ceiling soared impossibly high, disappearing into shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. But what seized his attention completely were the walls, covered floor to ceiling with crystalline formations that pulsed with inner fire, each one containing swirling patterns of light that suggested vast stores of information waiting to be unlocked. As he approached the nearest cluster of crystals, they began to resonate with a musical harmony that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to something deeper in his consciousness. The moment his fingers made contact with the smooth surface, reality exploded around him in a cascade of impossible visions. Ancient Earth, but not the Earth he knew. Cities that touched the clouds, built from materials that sang with their own inner light. Humans, but humans transformed, evolved beyond their primitive origins into beings of grace and terrible power. They stood as guardians over a galaxy teeming with life, their technology indistinguishable from magic, their wisdom spanning eons. Warriors in armor forged from captured starlight itself, wielding weapons that could unmake the very fabric of spacetime. Fleets of vessels that moved not through space but around it, bending reality to their will. A civilization that had transcended the limitations of mortality while retaining the essential spark that made them human. The First Empire, Marcus gasped, the words emerging from knowledge he didn't remember acquiring. These weren't just any predecessors. They were humanity's own ancestors, the original children of Terra who had claimed the galaxy as their birthright countless millennia ago. The visions intensified, showing him the golden age of human supremacy. Worlds terraformed with a thought, species uplifted and guided toward enlightenment. Peace maintained not through force but through the overwhelming presence of beings who had learned to wield compassion as effectively as any weapon. But pride, as always, preceded the fall. The ancient humans grew complacent in their godlike power, believing themselves beyond any possible threat. They failed to notice the subtle distortions appearing at the galaxy's edge, tears in reality itself that heralded the arrival of something that should never have existed. The Devourers came from the spaces between dimensions, entities of pure entropy that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence. They were hunger given form, darkness that ate light itself, and they viewed the thriving galaxy as nothing more than an elaborate meal waiting to be devoured. The war that followed defied description. Ancient humans fought with weapons that could shatter planets and remake solar systems, but the Devourers adapted to every assault, grew stronger from every victory. Worse, they seemed to feed on the very act of resistance, drawing power from the life force of those who opposed them. In their final desperate hour, as world after world fell to the endless hunger, the greatest champions of humanity made a terrible sacrifice. They scattered their people across the cosmos, deliberately fragmenting their empire to prevent the Devourers from consuming everything at once. The most powerful artifacts were hidden, sealed away with genetic locks that would only respond to humanity's distant descendants. The last transmission from the dying empire echoed across the chamber. Our children will return when the darkness stirs again. They will reclaim what was lost, and this time, they will be ready. Marcus staggered backward, his mind reeling from the magnitude of what he had witnessed. We weren't the weakest species, he whispered to the glowing crystals. We were never the weakest. We're the inheritors of the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. A new passage had opened in the chamber's far wall, revealing depths that thrummed with barely contained power, calling to something in his blood that recognized its true heritage. The armory that stretched before Marcus was a cathedral of war elevated to the realm of art. Weapons of impossible elegance hung, suspended in columns of pure energy, each one a masterpiece that transcended the crude distinction between tool and sculpture. Blades that seemed forged from crystallized time itself hummed with barely contained power. Rifles that appeared to be carved from single pieces of neutron star material pulsed with inner fire. Energy projectors that looked more like musical instruments than weapons sang harmonious notes that promised beautiful destruction. But at the chamber's heart stood something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat and his pulse thunder in his ears. The armor floated within a pillar of living light, its surface flowing between states of matter, as if it couldn't decide whether to be solid metal, liquid starlight, or pure energy. It was sized perfectly for a human frame, his frame, as if the ancient artificers had somehow reached across millennia to measure him specifically. The design married function with beauty in ways that modern technology couldn't even attempt, covering the wearer from head to toe in what appeared to be liquid mercury given consciousness and purpose. As Marcus stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible compulsion that felt like coming home, the armor's surface rippled with recognition. A voice emerged not through sound waves but as thoughts that formed directly in his consciousness, speaking in words older than recorded history yet perfectly comprehensible. At last, child of the scattered bloodline, heir to the throne of stars, I am Aegis, forged in the heart of a dying sun and worn by champion Alexios during the final stand against the endless hunger. For 10,000 years I have waited, dreaming of the day when Terra's children would remember their true nature. Marcus's voice came out as barely a whisper. I'm not worthy of this. I'm the weakest of my kind, mocked by every species in the galaxy. I've never won a single battle that mattered. The armor pulsed with what could only be described as gentle amusement. You believe strength is measured by the thickness of hide or the sharpness of claw. Your ancestors conquered the galaxy not through biological superiority, but through something far more precious, the indomitable will that burns in the human heart. That flame burns brightest in those who have been tested by adversity, refined by struggle, tempered by defeat. Marcus reached out with trembling fingers, barely brushing the armor's ever-shifting surface. The moment of contact sent lightning through his nervous system, flooding his mind with knowledge that had been lost since the fall of the First Empire. Combat techniques that turned physics into poetry, tactical awareness that could predict enemy movements 3 steps in advance, understanding of weapons and technologies that current science considered impossible. The galaxy grows dark once more. Aegis continued, its mental voice carrying the weight of prophecy. The barriers erected by your ancestors weaken with each passing day. The devourers stir in the void between realities, drawn by the chaos and suffering that spreads across the worlds like a plague. The lesser species mock humanity because they sense what terrifies them, that within your fragmented bloodline lies the potential to rise again as guardians of all life. The armor began to unfold like a metallic flower, revealing the incredibly sophisticated systems within. Neural interfaces that would amplify human reflexes to superhuman levels, energy shields capable of deflecting the fury of stars, strength amplifiers that could let him match any Krex warrior in single combat, integrated weapons that could level mountains or heal the deepest wounds. Will you accept this burden, Marcus Kane? Will you become the bridge between what humanity was and what it must become again? Marcus looked at his reflection in the armor's polished surface and saw not the mocked outcast from the cantina, but the descendant of star conquerors awakening to his birthright. The transformation was beyond anything Marcus could have conceived in his wildest dreams or most fevered nightmares. The moment Aegis sealed around his body, reality itself seemed to expand, revealing layers of existence that his unenhanced senses had never been able to perceive. Through the armor's quantum-enhanced neural interface, he could see the electromagnetic signatures of every piece of technology within kilometers, track the probability matrices of potential combat scenarios, and process tactical information at speeds that would have overwhelmed his baseline human consciousness. The symbiosis is complete, Aegis murmured with satisfaction, its voice now an integral part of his thought processes rather than an external presence. Do not be alarmed by the sensory expansion. Your consciousness will adapt to the enhanced input within moments. The armor learns as you learn, grows stronger as you grow stronger. But remember always, descendant, the armor does not create the warrior. It merely reveals what was always present within. Marcus flexed his fingers experimentally, marveling at the perfect responsiveness of the suit. The armor felt weightless, yet he could sense its incredible durability in every molecule. Sophisticated sensors indicated it could withstand direct antimatter bombardment and operate comfortably in the photosphere of a star. Energy readings cascaded through his awareness. Power levels that could run a small city, shields capable of deflecting planet-killer weapons, integrated weapons systems that made modern military hardware look like primitive clubs. As he explored deeper into the ancient vessel's archives, guided by Aegis's accumulated knowledge, Marcus discovered treasures beyond imagination. Complete databases containing the technological blueprints of humanity's golden age, star charts leading to hidden vaults scattered across the galaxy where more artifacts lay waiting, and most critically, comprehensive tactical analyses of the Devourer threat compiled by the greatest military minds in human history. Study these records carefully, Aegis urged as holographic displays materialized around them, showing strategic assessments that spanned millennia. The Devourers are not merely returning. They are already here. The barriers your ancestors erected at such terrible cost are failing. The increasing conflicts among the current galactic species create exactly the kind of psychic discord that the Devourers consume for sustenance. Marcus absorbed the data with his enhanced cognitive processes, his augmented intellect processing possibilities and implications at superhuman speed. The current galactic military forces, impressive as they seem to primitive human eyes, would be completely unprepared for enemies that thrived on conventional warfare, that grew stronger from consuming the life force of their opponents, that could adapt their tactics and abilities in real time to counter any strategy. How long before they break through completely? Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer from the pattern analysis streaming through his consciousness. Months at most, possibly weeks. The signs are already manifesting across the outer rim. Vessels vanishing without distress calls, colonies going silent with no survivors to tell their tales, ancient ruins on dozens of worlds spontaneously activating after eons of dormancy. The galaxy's leaders dismiss these incidents as unrelated phenomena, but those who understand the historical patterns can see the truth. A proximity alarm suddenly blazed through the ship's defensive systems, cutting through their conversation like a plasma blade. 3 vessels were approaching at high speed, consortium military ships running with full tactical loadouts. Marcus's theft of the reconnaissance vessel had not gone unnoticed after all. "Your first true test approaches, champion," Aegis observed with unmistakable anticipation. "How will you handle those who would prevent you from fulfilling humanity's destiny?" Marcus smiled grimly, feeling power course through him like liquid lightning. "Time to show them what humans are truly capable of when we stop pretending to be weak." The ancient ship's dormant systems awakened at Marcus's touch like a sleeping giant rousing to consciousness. Weapons arrays that had slumbered for millennia hummed to life with energy signatures so advanced that the consortium vessel sensors couldn't even properly classify them. Through his neural link with the ship, Marcus felt its vast power flowing through him, not just machinery, but something approaching artificial consciousness that recognized him as its rightful commander. "Captain Vorthak." Marcus's voice carried across the communication channels with an authority that surprised even him, resonating with harmonics that seemed to bypass the conscious mind and speak directly to primal instincts. "I'm transmitting my coordinates and issuing one warning. Withdraw your vessels immediately and report to the Consortium Council that humanity has reclaimed its ancient birthright. What happens in the next 60 seconds will determine whether that heritage serves as your shield or your sword." The Zeltharian captain's response crackled with indignation and barely controlled fury. "Human, you are in possession of stolen military property and restricted archaeological materials classified at the highest levels. Your delusional claims about ancient heritage cannot excuse your crimes. Surrender immediately or face the combined firepower of 3 heavy combat vessels." The attacking ships represented the absolute pinnacle of current galactic military engineering: the destroyer Retribution with its Nova-class plasma cannons, the heavy cruiser Dominance bristling with quantum torpedo arrays, and Vorthak's own command vessel Dominator, a battleship whose antimatter batteries could crack continents. Their combined offensive capability could sterilize entire worlds, and they had positioned themselves in a perfect kill formation that would allow no escape. Against any conventional opponent, surrender would be the only rational choice. But Marcus Kane was no longer conventional by any measure. "Trust in the bond between ship and pilot," Aegis counseled, its voice calm amid the rising tension. "Your ancestors designed this vessel as more than mere technology. It responds to will, to intent, to the fire that burns within the human spirit. Do not think, simply desire, and reality will reshape itself accordingly." As the first wave of quantum torpedoes erupted from the destroyer's launch tubes, Marcus didn't consciously activate any defensive systems. He simply refused to allow harm to touch him. The ancient ship's point defense network materialized around them like a web of living lightning, not merely destroying the incoming weapons but somehow converting their destructive energy into additional power for the ship's own systems. "Impossible," Vorthak's voice whispered across the comm channels. All arrogance suddenly drained from his tone. The second assault came simultaneously from all 3 vessels, concentrated antimatter beams designed to punch through any known shielding technology. Marcus felt the ancient ship's true defenses activate for the first time in eons, and space itself seemed to solidify around them. The beams struck what appeared to be crystallized vacuum, their tremendous energy absorbed and redirected harmlessly into hyperspace. Now it was Marcus's turn to demonstrate the gulf between current technology and the achievements of humanity's golden age. But instead of destruction, he chose a more elegant lesson. The ancient ship simply appeared beside each consortium vessel in sequence, moving not through space but around it, traveling via methods that rendered their targeting computers useless. A single gentle touch from the ship's hull sent each massive warship spinning gracefully through space, their weapons systems cleanly disabled, their crews unharmed, but their assumptions about universal power hierarchies shattered beyond repair. Lesson concluded, Marcus announced calmly, opening channels to all 3 vessels simultaneously. Your weapons represent 10,000 years of advancement since humanity was scattered. You've just witnessed what we accomplished before our fall. The emergency session of the Galactic Consortium Council convened in absolute chaos, with representatives from dozens of species filling the vast amphitheater with a cacophony of arguments, accusations, and barely controlled panic. Holographic displays flickered around the circular chamber, showing footage of the impossible encounter that had sent shockwaves through every military command in known space. The sight of 3 state-of-the-art warships being effortlessly neutralized by a single ancient vessel had shattered fundamental assumptions about power, technology, and the natural order of galactic civilization. Preposterous beyond measure, roared Ambassador Theklim, his massive Krex frame trembling with indignation as his war-scarred hide gleamed under the chamber's harsh illumination. No single human, no matter how advanced his stolen technology, could possess such overwhelming capability. This must be an elaborate deception, a holographic fabrication designed to destabilize the established order. Chancellor Velterra, the ancient Vashti whose serpentine coils had presided over the council for nearly 3 decades, raised one scaled hand for silence. Her compound eyes, evolved to perceive across 17 different spectrums of light, studied the tactical displays with clinical precision. The energy signatures have been verified by our most advanced analysis protocols. The vessel's technology predates our earliest archaeological records by several million years. More disturbing still, the human-transmitted historical data that correlates perfectly with classified fragments discovered at excavation sites across 47 different worlds. Fragments that any competent archaeologist could have pieced together through careful research, sneered High Commander Zektar, the same Krex warrior who had publicly humiliated Marcus in the cantina mere days earlier. His voice carried the desperation of someone watching his worldview crumble in real time. I demand this pretender be dragged before this council in chains to answer for his unprecedented violations of galactic law. Your demand has been noted, High Commander, Chancellor Velterra replied with icy formality. And apparently, it will be granted sooner than you anticipated. The chamber's massive doors dilated with mechanical precision, and Marcus Kane entered alone, still encased in the armor that seemed to drink in the ambient light and reflect it back as liquid starfire. But the being who walked down the central aisle bore no resemblance to the broken, mocked soldier who had fled the station in shame. The armor had not merely enhanced his physical capabilities, it had awakened something profound within him, a confidence and authority that seemed to resonate from his very genetic code. Honorable representatives of the Galactic Consortium, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space without any technological amplification, reaching every delegate with crystalline clarity. I stand before you not as a criminal seeking forgiveness, but as a herald bringing warning of an extinction-level threat that approaches with each passing moment. You will address this assembly with appropriate respect, human, Zektar snarled, rising from his delegation section with predatory intent. You may have acquired some ancient trinket, but you remain nothing more than. The Krex warrior never completed his sentence. Marcus moved with fluid grace that made speed irrelevant, crossing the chamber floor in what seemed like a single step. One moment Zektar was advancing threateningly. The next he hung suspended in midair, held gently but immovably by Marcus's gauntlet hand, his massive bulk rendered as helpless as a child. I am Marcus Kane, he said with quiet dignity, carefully placing the stunned warrior back on his feet with infinite gentleness. Heir to the first human empire, guardian of technologies that shaped this galaxy before your species learned to make fire, and the only hope you have of surviving what comes next. The holographic displays around the chamber suddenly blazed to life, showing real-time sensor data from across the galactic rim. Reality tiers widening, ancient evil stirring, the devourers preparing to feast once more on a galaxy that had forgotten the lessons of the past.